primary role he had for me was as a role model of how to act as a Jew, how to treat other people, and not see Jews as a mitzvah machine, but to see them as whole people and attend to their needs, whether it's medical needs, physical needs, emotional needs, housing, whatever it might be. That was my strongest impression of him.
I met Rabbi Levitansky when I was 12 years old, when my younger sister was in release time in the public school. He invited our family to come to Chabad House, and my mom would take us for Purim and Simchas Torah annually to Chabad House.
We were married at Chabad House in Simcha Monica. We did nothing. It was a gift. The wedding was a gift to us. Zach, let him rest in peace, was the cook and left. So there was no one in charge even of the kitchen after he cooked dinner. There must have been people, waiters or something, I don't even know. And the band played until 5 o'clock in the morning. They just jammed and everybody was dancing, and they brought in bus loads of bachers from the yeshiva. It was a crazy evening. In fact, they were ready to bench and say Sheva Brachas, and David and I hadn't even washed yet. David used to tease all the time. When we'd come to Chabad House, to Simcha Monica, he'd say, "You see this oil spot on the sidewalk over here? That's where we got married, on that oil spot."
As Rabbi Levitansky liked to say, the most important part of the year was camp. Kids can learn more in camp than the whole rest of the year. Chabad House, there was a levity in the things at camp that you don't necessarily find at other camps, a silliness that the kids just loved, and they looked forward to camp.
David would drive sometimes camp bus, but he was never the official driver, but it never failed that at about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, before camp, the first day of camp, so the camp was starting in 5 or 6 hours, David would get a call from Rabbi Levitansky saying, "Come, I need you in the morning to drive bus."
The Levitanskys were always so welcoming. I used to stay at Rabbi Levitansky's house Shabbos. And Chabad House at that time was on Montana. And there's a little story that happened on a Shabbos, an Erev Shabbos that started. Years ago, we used to go downtown to month-end sales. So all the stores had bargains, schmatzes, schlotzkes, whatever. And I went with Mrs. Levitansky and Bubby Levitansky and Elia, Oliver Shalom. And we came back, and it was very, very, very late. And even though there was no parking on Montana, I had to park the van there because it was so late. It was almost the Shkia. So we ran into Chabad House and we bench-licht. And we left the van there. We figured whatever happens, happens. And the Levitansky family slept in the front room of this Chabad House. They would pack up the entire family. Then I think it was Isaac, Chana Fruma, and Esther Dreza. And then we all come in the morning, we'd daven. We came back in the morning and we saw that the glass store next door was totally smashed up. And then we saw that the van was totally smashed up. There had been some teenagers that were street racing and their cars went out of control. And I dread to think what would have happened if the van had not been parked there. And it was so beshert that we left it there, and the family, Baruch Hashem, is here to tell the tale.
I think it was Mrs. Bender used to come for Shabbos to Simcha Monica, and must have been Chana Fruma, used to drive her home after Shabbos. Your dad was going back to Chabad House, and I think maybe the camper was over by Chabad House, so I went with them. Hannah Fruma is driving the car. Mrs. Binder is sitting in front. Your father is now sitting in the back. And I go to get in. And I'm looking, where do I sit here on this back seat with your father? And your father said, "Get in, I'm not that religious."
The second accident, which was in 1999, Mendel was also in the car and Ilana was in the car. And Betty was driving and Mendel was in the front seat. Again, it was a tragedy and a miracle at the same time. Betty passed away. Mendel was in the front seat, but he had no injuries. He walked away from it. And Ilan had no injuries. When I was driving to the hospital, after I got a call, I didn't know the extent of Betty's injuries. I just called Rabbi Levitansky and told him she had been in an accident, and I was going there to see how they were doing. By the time I got to the hospital in Northern California, Rabbi Levitansky had already found out that she had unfortunately had passed away. He arrived there to console me and to support me. Betty passed away in 1999. I started seeing Myrna in 2001. Of course, I wanted Rabbi Levitansky to meet her, so we met with him, and he said to her, "So what makes you think you can handle these children? I don't care about you, but I want to know that you can handle these children." His concern was always the children with me as well. He would say to me after the accident, "I don't care about you, tell me how the children are doing."
Rabbi Gordon was borrowing a minibus from Rabbi Levitansky, and I was the bus driver that summer for Rabbi Gordon. And we drove out to Levitansky's, and we picked up this minibus. And while I was there, Rabbi Levitansky took me aside, and he says, "You know, I have this young man who I really would like you to meet." My first reaction was, "Nah, I'm not interested. I'm here. I got a bracha from the Rebbe just to be here. I'm just gonna chill over the summer." He says, "No, you have to go out with him. You have to meet him." We started going out the next week between him and Naftali Yostul, and they convinced us to go out together. 6 weeks later, we got engaged, and 6 weeks later, we got married. And it's 43 years later.
David made the first menorah because they had decided, okay, they wanted a public menorah. And this was, gosh, I don't even know when, way in the beginning. And David was sent off to the tinsmith to make a big menorah. And as he's leaving, he realizes he can't take this menorah because it looked like a cross. And he's carrying it out over his shoulder. And realized, no, I don't think, and the guy is saying, "I'm leaving. I'm closed up. The store is finished. I'm finished." And David said, "No, you have to do something with this menorah." And I think they put bars on it or something leading from the T down to the base. But yeah, that was one of the first menorahs that they had for a public lighting here, at least in California. And that was the same menorah that broke David's fall from the Chabad House fire.
Fast forward a number of years, we were evicted from our apartment here in Los Angeles. We got the eviction notice on Purim, 30 days to vacate. We looked and looked and looked. Nobody wanted to take us with 4 children. And of course I called Rabbi Levitansky. "What do I do? Where do I go?" He said, "Oh, I have 2 one-bedroom apartments vacant upstairs. You could move there. We'll make a doorway between the 2 apartments, and you'll have 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and 2 living rooms." We moved in. Erev Pesach, we spent the next year and a half on the Broadway. And I remember going to work in the morning and coming home in the afternoon and not knowing if Rabbi Levitansky would be in his classic position on the floor with the telephone, making phone calls, going, "Oh, you're home." Okay. And those were the best years of my life.
In the year and a half we spent, the thing that stands out most of them in my mind was one Shabbos. We had a big cholent on the fire, on the blech. I don't remember why I did it, but I did it. I took the blech off the fire. I took the cholent off the blech. My wife, Shoshana, was not happy at all. And I wasn't happy either. I was very embarrassed. And I said, well, I don't know what to do. But I took it off, and it wasn't good. So your father, we called your father. He spent a good amount of time looking in Sfarim, and he said, put it back on the fire. I said, what? I don't know if he did it, or if I did it, or if you did it, but we put it back on the fire, and everything, Baruch Hashem. I thought that was going to be just the worst Shabbos in the world, but Baruch Hashem, everything was fine.
We had the wedding in Atlanta, and Rabbi Levitansky was the Masada Kedushin. And I remember at one point he untied my shoes for me, and I felt very uncomfortable with that he would be bending down and untying my shoes. It didn't seem proper for him to be doing that. And of course he waved it off and said, "Oh, don't worry about it." Also every year, of course, I went to Chabad house for Taras Nedarim, and at one point Rabbi Levitansky would stand up and recite. I was sitting at the table, and I just felt very uncomfortable with that I should be sitting as his judge.
Whenever there was something really, really important, Rabbi Levitansky we'd go to him and he'd write the letter. I remember one letter, I was supposed to have some surgery. We weren't getting a response from the Rebbe. I kept going to Rabbi Levitansky and saying, it's imminent, this is scheduled. And I went for my pre-op the day before, and they still didn't have a response. The doctor, who was familiar with Lubavitchers, said, I know how to get the letter. I says, no, you don't understand. Rabbi Levitansky is taking care of it, and it'll be fine. And I might have to call that day or the day before and cancel because I'm not having the surgery without a bracha from the Rebbe. And sure enough, just before, I guess it was the night before or something, and the Rebbe, I was supposed to have the surgery on a Friday. He asked Rabbi Levitansky to confer with another Rav about what was happening, and he contacted Rabbi Hendel in Montreal. And the bottom line was, because the surgery was going to be on a Friday, the Rebbe was concerned that having surgery on a Friday, if God forbid there was any problem, over the weekend, doctors, you get the residents, your regular doctors aren't normally around. And they wanted to make sure that my doctor was going to be around. And I called my doctor, and he said, I would not have scheduled a surgery for you unless I was going to be there personally the entire weekend. Whenever any of the rabbis would go to New York, we'd always get a call. We were a small community, and they would call around, we're going to New York, write a letter to the Rebbe. And my Amy wrote a letter to the Rebbe that her mom should have a baby. I was pregnant the next month. I was going in for cervical spine surgery. And by this time, Rabbi Levitansky had already passed. And so obviously the Rebbe also, but we would use the Igris. So I wrote in that I wanted a bracha. I didn't know which doctor to take. I had one doctor that I had scheduled time, and the other I didn't. Well, the one time was the 18th of Adar 1. And I wrote the letter. I went to Rabbi Heidensfeld, and he and I sat down together. We put the letter in the Igris. And the letter that was in the letter was, Dear Avrohom, thank you for letting me know that the surgery went well and everything is good. That was just short and sweet. And the date of the letter was the 19th of Adar 1.
I remember your father when Purim was Motzei Shabbos. He made Havdalah on a bottle of what's that kind of bubbly wine that we used to drink? It's like Moscato kind of thing.
Moscato d'Asti.
Yeah, and he on the bottle itself.
I was concerned, so I sent him a donation, and I designated for buying an air conditioning for his office. But of course it never happened, because he would never spend money just on himself, only on the Chabad house, only to further the Rebbe's work or for somebody else, but not for himself. I remember one time he said, well, people don't want to pay for paper towels. They want their money to go for something more elevated. So I sent him a check one time, and I wrote on it for paper towels.
Everybody would, get our the shopping carts, and we would take kids, and we would take everything needed to make the Kriyas Torah and make Shavuos
On Ocean Avenue.
Overlooking the beach.
The RV there, which held the Sefer Torah. And I don't remember the lady's name, but she came and she built this out of paper mache, these huge mountains on these flatbed trucks. It was amazing, because we walked probably 20, 30 people on Santa Monica Boulevard to Ocean Avenue, and we would have a minyan and a kriya, and it was, I think, maybe even an ice cream party for the kids on Shavuos. And hundreds of people heard the Aseret Nemus who would not normally hear it. And how we were able, with Rabbi Levitansky's visions, accomplish all these amazing things.
When my son Matthew was time for his bar mitzvah and it's time to put on tefillin, for the first time, my father was in the hospital. Rabbi Levitansky wanted to make sure that he was part of that simcha of watching his grandson put tefillin on for the first time. Off we went, Rabbi Levitansky and Matthew and I and David, off to the hospital we went so that my father could watch his grandson put tefillin on for the first time. And then when it was time for his bar mitzvah, we wanted the bar mitzvah to be on a Sunday. And it just happened that 2 weeks after my son's bar mitzvah was Rosh Chodesh on a Sunday. So we planned his bar mitzvah on a Sunday so that everybody could attend. Anyway, David and I did all the cooking, and the bar mitzvah was in Chabad house. David and I are busy cooking, and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and Rabbi Stillman was there, and he was in the kitchen, and we were talking and about the next morning, the bar mitzvah, and Rabbi Stillman looks at us and says, "Oh, I'm not going to be there tomorrow morning. I have to go pick up my wife." Well, now we had all these guests coming, and we had no rabbi. Well, needless to say, early in the morning, we called up Rabbi Levitansky, and as always, he was there, and he showed up, and he led the services for my son's beautiful bar mitzvah. And so that's just the kind of man Rabbi Levitansky was, that he was interested in all the little things and was there for, at the drop of a hat, to be there to help. Rabbi Levitansky was a real cool cat.
Avrohom, yes, we're the children that you dreamed of, and we're that shining star you saw at night. You know it's true, why we call you Avinu. Our Father upright, we got your soul inside, take us home.